My cheating boyfriend slept with my sister 2 days before our wedding, so I dumped him and took a trip to Europe with his money. I was in a relationship with my fiancé for over 4 years. It started off really well. He asked me out after we met in a small bar. I fell in love with his small quirks. Obviously, he had a lot of flaws as well. He would drink every single night and get really agitated when drunk. He would never take care of his hygiene, or never help with any chores around the house. But he spoiled me enough to look past all of them. Halfway through our relationship, he was laid off from his company and really began struggling with his rent, so I let him move in with me. It felt like I was doing more for him than he was for me, but I really wanted to move ahead in life. He finally proposed to me after getting his job back, and I was happy that my life was moving in a great direction. For the past 6 months, I have been so excited about the wedding that I've had trouble sleeping. I left no stones unturned in the planning of my wedding. Everything was shaping up to be perfect. But little did I know, my fiancé was cooking up an affair behind my back. My sister was, for some reason, very involved in the planning of my wedding. We had never been close because I had a lot of problems with substance abuse. But I was really glad to see her so happy for me, and made her my maid of honor. That gave her access to all the details, including the keys for the hotel rooms that we were supposed to stay at. The wedding venue was a few hours away from where we lived, so we went there 2 days early to prepare ourselves for the big occasion. During the night, I am having fun catching up with some family friends when I realize that both my fiancé and my sister are missing. I didn't pay it any mind at first, and only went up to my room once I was tired and ready to sleep. But since my fiancé was still missing, and not picking my phone calls, I decided to go look for him. My sister's room was on the way to the elevator, so I decided to ask her for help. But as soon as I opened the door, I regretted my decision. My sister was lying naked on the bed, and my fiancé was on top of her. The position was so ridiculous that it made me laugh for a second before I realized what was going on. I screamed like I had just seen a ghost, and ran out with tears in my eyes. I just went and barricaded myself in my room. I couldn't believe that my own sister had betrayed me like that. And that too just days before my wedding day. I was disgusted with my fiancé to such an extent that I couldn't even look at his face. I wept silently against the door as he tried to explain how it was all just a mistake and that it wasn't what I think it was. When I didn't fall for his obvious lies, he started saying that we can still fix this, and that he still loves me a lot. I was too far gone, however, and his words never reached me. Were the last 4 years of my life really a complete waste? We spent so many moments together, and I never thought that he was someone who was capable of doing this. Maybe he had done it before, and I just never caught him. Thoughts like that plagued my mind. After a couple hours, I noticed that he was still outside the room, waiting for me to open the door. But I wasn't going to forgive him. And instead do what any sane woman in my position would have done. I opened my laptop and booked an all-expenses-paid trip to Europe, with countries like France and Italy on the travel schedule. And of course, I used his card to pay for it. It was several $1,000s because I was literally leaving in 10 hours. So I packed all my stuff and prepared to leave. I opened the door, took my ring off and threw it at him while saying, "We're done, I hope she makes you happier than I did." And ran off.
You want to nitpick where I am at any given time? I'll organize our entire staff against you, cutting your free work. I used to work in a trade shop run by a great boss. Everyone got along great, except for one of the department heads. Let's call them B. For reasons unrelated to this story, the boss decided to sell the shop to B, and in the wake, the majority of the staff quit within months, leaving us understaffed. I naively decided to stick it out and assumed that B would hire people to fill the empty positions, but they didn't. We go from a 15-person trade shop to a 5-person shop within a year, and that includes the 6 people who turned over. One of the many issues that developed was B's inability to schedule, or think through actions to the end, and plan ahead. While I worked there, I often came in 10 to 15 minutes early due to the nature of my commute. I'd come in, unload my stuff, make some coffee, small talk with my coworkers, shoot the poop with my boss, but we never really started work until everyone's scheduled start time. When B took over, the moment you stepped into the stop, B immediately started to bark orders at you regardless if you were in the building 15 to 20 minutes early. When I would point out we technically weren't on the clock yet for another 15 to 20 minutes and I want to make coffee, B would just snap at you, telling you to do it now because so and so is coming right at opening. So I started to wait in my car, and would only walk in the door as the last minute was changing. I was technically never late to work, and was ready to work the moment I stepped through the door. I don't know if B caught on, but the rest of my staff did and followed suit. For the remaining months I lasted there, all my coworkers would still often show up early to work, but all waited in the vehicles and went in as a group. Anytime a new person joined, we would also warn them of what would happen. It's been several years since I worked there, I do not know any of the current staff beside B. I happened to be doing an on-site install nearby at the time that shop would open in the and looked over into the parking lot in front of the shop. Like clockwork, a minute before the shop was scheduled to open, about 6 people got out of their vehicles and headed in. 7 horrible seniors in my class together, and how I completely ruined their web of lies. I had already heard tales of some of these troublemaking parents. Other teachers were just dying to hear stories about our interactions, because these parents were very much entitled. They would name drop lawyers when they didn't get their way, try to badger teachers into giving their kids extra credit, and would largely deny any wrongdoing on their kids' part. These were the parents who would get called in because their student was busted cheating, then accuse the teacher of making the class too hard, therefore validating their student's need to cheat. So about these knuckleheads. It was a group of roughly 7 senior boys who all shifted their schedules to be in the same period with each other. The other teachers could not believe that I had all of them at the same time, but I just shrugged it off. Every week, the staff lounge was dying to know how I dealt with their shenanigans, but for the most part, I had shut down most of their poop from day one. I actually got along very well with them, despite their constant goofing, because they had mastered the ability to appear busy and didn't distract my other kids. Then came the first group project. My class size was just right for 7 groups of 4 to form. The idiot collective formed 2 groups of 4 by pulling in a kid who had been absent on the first day of the project. These 2 groups crashed and burned on this project so hard for several reasons, but the biggest were that A, they effed around during class time, and B, put off a 2-week assignment until the weekend before and then dumped all the work on everybody else, which resulted in everybody doing minimal effort. I handed out the poop grades and was immediately pulled into parent conferences with several of them. Every meeting was the same. My kid did all the work, so he doesn't deserve a bad grade, or my kid didn't understand the assignment, to which I handed over my hyper-specific rubric, which is a checklist for how I grade things. I never wanted to be accused of grading based on not liking a kid. These largely went like this: EP, my kid did all the work and I don't think it's fair it should hurt his grade. Me, here is the work your student turned in. Here is my rubric which I printed and emailed to your student the day the project started. As you can see, I have itemized the grading for ease of use. I would be happy to go over the grade your student earned. EP, reads through all the evidence, looks at kid, where are the missing parts? Student, my group members were responsible for that. Me, I can't grade what I never received, so I can't reasonably just raise your kid's grade. Sorry. Now, while this did suck for them, the good news is that I make assignments worth more throughout the semester with the idea that kids who screw up early on can make it up later by working hard. I seed extra credit throughout the semester and all of these parents are disgruntled, but happy to hear that their entitled embryo can still get an A in my class. Now, the end result of these meetings was that it clearly wasn't my fault, so it must be the other kid's fault. So these parents all decide that their perfect angel is no longer allowed to work with their previous group mates. Like a cancer, this failure of friends spreads through the rest of the class. Like the genius that I am, I make my students write a group contract for every project that details who does what and when it is due. Why is this important? Because the contract provides me with the documentation necessary to allow me to dismiss a bad group member and give them a 0 without their parents SHing all over my day. So here is where the problem begins manifesting. These seniors begin bouncing from group to group like cancerous ping pong balls, wreaking havoc. I let students choose their groups, so these seniors are desperately integrating with anybody that will have them. Because of my class size, every group has at least one coddled child to deal with, and these children just end up rotating until all of my students have worked with one of these seniors at some point. Now I'm getting constant complaints from parents of other kids about these boys. Their kid wanted a good grade, which means they ended up doing all the work while the senior slacked. This is usually after the fact, at which time I bring up I would love to yank that leech out of your grade pool, but you have to use the contract. Students don't want to say anything because they fear retribution from the seniors, but I can't do anything because I will be accused of harassment. The contract can provide me with the leverage I need to prove that these kids were doing no work, because these seniors have been playing with their parents for years. I make my class utilize Google Docs, because the changes are time-stamped. No joke, I've had students produce all the work the morning of a parent meeting to try and lie their way out and make me look like a piece of poop, but that timestamp is a godsend. Luckily, my class is balanced. A SHT groupmate can make things hard, but not undoable, and parents are appeased that I have an out for their kid, but disappointed that their kid doesn't use it. Every time I announce a group project is on the way, some of these seniors sucker up to the other kids to the point that it is expected that a spot will be made for them. I'm talking about buying kids lunch, bringing them gifts, etc. Seriously, the day before a group project starts, all of the seniors now sit at separate tables from each other so that they could pull the "I'm already here, let's be in a group" card. The strain on class morale is difficult, but I am biding my time. The other students are grabbing at extra credit opportunities constantly so that their grade can absorb the blow, and parent complaints are completely mitigated because I am still offering every chance for success. My principal has a copy of my syllabus on his computer so that he can quote student policies that the parent signed off on too. Not uncommon for him to hear I don't read that poop, so it doesn't apply, but he reminds them that the clause above the signature line says my signature denotes that I have read this document in its entirety and agree to abide by all the rules or something similar, and that this should be a lesson to the parent and the student that when you sign something, you should read the fine print. 7 horrible seniors in my class together, and how I completely ruined their web of lies. I've been teaching for many years, but it's important to understand that in my first year of teaching, I got put on blast by an elite group of EPs and their EC. Not a week went by without someone either demanding my job, trying to undermine me, or just calling me a piece of poop. I nearly quit halfway through the first semester, the verbal and emotional abuse was so bad. This was at a school in a tough area, so I was accused of racism constantly for asking kids to stop talking, was ripped into for giving failing grades for missing work, and even enforcing the rules in the student/parent handbook got me in hot water. My principal reprimanded me for being a negative influence on the school and was told that I needed to let more rules slide because he was tired of hearing from parents. I would have parents just show up unannounced to sit in on my lessons and then tell me I was a SHT educator, a bad human being, etc. I have plenty of horror stories from that school alone, but the point I want to make is that this experience defined the kind of teacher I became going forward to my next school. I needed to be that person who was untouchable, because I needed to focus on the one job that mattered, teaching kids. My next school was in a fairly affluent area. It wasn't uncommon for me to find out that my students' parents made millions, which brought its own set of problems. However, my new principal was super supportive of me as long as I followed the school's handbook to the letter because, by doing so, I was in line with the school's philosophy and protected by law. This school had long ago learned that caving to parent demands spilled blood in the water and brought the rest of the sharks in droves. My first year at this new school was successful for many reasons, but primarily because the school culture was easily adapted to. By planning ahead, I was able to head off 99% of all negative parents at the pass. The few times a parent tried to rip into me at conferences, I ripped back so hard that I developed a reputation amongst the kids and parents as someone you couldn't F with. Everything I did was in line with the rules, and any attempt to take me down got stonewalled by my principal who would have to say Mr. My name is following school policy, so I'm afraid the ultimate decision is his. No joke, I had some parents in tears because their kid could no longer get an A in my class. I wasn't the teacher who wanted to destroy kids, I just wanted them to be accountable, and sometimes that meant letting them fail. Needless to say, this job became a lot of fun, because instead of waiting to be ambushed by parents, I could work on making my class fun for my students while still teaching them something. I made ironclad rules for the classroom that brooked little argument and would adapt the following year to make it harder for students or parents to ruin my day. I have many stories like this, but this is one of my favorites. The year this happened, I taught a HS class with grades 9 to 12. My class wasn't necessary to graduate, but did count as a core requirement. One of my beginning of the year rules was I never want to hear when will we ever need this? Because you didn't have to sign up for this class. My class was built so that it had something to offer everybody. If you tried your best, you were guaranteed a C. If you worked really hard, you could get a B or an A. I would bust my SS to help a student with any reasonable request. The best example of this was when a student was working hard on an assignment and said I think I understand it now, but can't turn it in on time, to which I answered then turn it in tomorrow for full credit. This is how hard work pays off. Other than a few hard deadlines in my class, I would do whatever it took to see you learn the material. F around in my class? I have already found ways to run circles around the pathetic excuses you throw at your parents for your piss-poor performance. It sounds callous, but I was the teacher who would stay for 90 minutes after school to help you catch up, to help fix your project for another class, or even to listen to you cry about your parents' divorce. If I caught you goofing in class instead of doing your work, I would warn you a couple times, email your parents, and then wait and see if they even gave a poop. If they didn't, I would let you keep digging that hole until you were hip deep in water and begging for a ladder. And then I would toss you a rope instead. You could still climb it if you tried hard enough, but a lot of kids would just cry until that hole caved in and buried them. I also utilized my school's online grading/assignment system for nearly all of my assignments, which meant I could document when a student looked at the assignment, how long it took them, etc. All of this allowed me to see what my students were doing, when they did it, and also if they were plagiarizing. This was one of the tools that helped me make important decisions about leniency, and also allowed me to say things at conferences such as of course the test was hard, your child didn't attempt the 9 homework assignments until 11 p.m. the night before the test. Being able to prove that a student wasn't trying made it impossible for blame to be laid unfairly at my feet. It also meant the worst kids avoided my class. However, this year, something magical happened. Every other year, I would get a wave of kids who just wanted to screw around and blame everyone else for doing poorly. At the end of the year, students would poop talk me, my class sizes would drop the following year, then I would receive high praise from those 7 horrible seniors in my class together, and how I completely ruined their web of lies. I've been teaching for many years, but it's important to understand that in my first year of teaching, naval officer didn't want to live with degenerate enlisted, so I got him fired. I was a Navy enlisted service member and was stationed in Yokosuka, Japan for a few years before I got transferred back stateside. I worked in the main hospital that cared for service members and their beneficiaries. It's a small hospital so everyone knows everyone. Shortly after I left, I caught wind of a new physician officer working in the radiology department. My friends would say he's horrible to work with, but that's nothing new. However, someone saw him print a letter and he left it on his desk and took a picture of it and sent it to me. He's requesting to move from enlisted housing to officer. For context, military housing is available for those who are married, have a family, or are qualified based on their rank and depending on the military base itself. Typically, officer housing is much nicer than the enlisted. In Yokosuka, housing is basically the same all around because it's overseas. But most of the housing are apartments and each apartment complex is called a tower, example, Fuji Tower. There are 9 towers and 2 are for officers since enlisted members outnumber officers by a lot. Now, one thing about the military, poop happens. When getting stationed, it is the active duty member's responsibility to either apply for housing on or off base before arriving, depending on what is allowed. If there is limited space and you don't apply for housing on time, then you get put where there is space. So our new officer got placed in an enlisted tower. Mind you, enlisted members have families of their own and other officers have been placed in enlisted housing before without an issue. Here are some quotes in his letter. I have many valid objections to living in a building of almost all enlisted and even many lower enlisted being an officer. There is a lot of crime, violent actions, substance use and alcoholism that happen in enlisted housing. There are also intimate assaults and other perverts. I have a good-looking family, a wife and 2 daughters aged 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities. My family should be safe in housing that is with officers. Officers are much more respectable and these types of deviant activities are incredibly rare compared to the deviant activities of enlisted being commonplace. Other officer families will not want to visit us because our family lives in enlisted housing. My children need to make friends with other officer children. My wife needs to make friends with other officers' wives. I need to make friends with other officers. Forcing an officer to live in a large apartment building with almost all enlisted is unethical. You get the idea, he's a piece of work. This guy basically looks down on all enlisted service members, assuming every single one are substance users, perverts/PDOS, criminals, etc. The kicker? He was an enlisted Army member before going to officer school. In civilian terms, think of a manager that discriminates and calls all of his subordinates criminals, violent, alcoholics, pervs, substance users, etc. based on your job position. Forgetting that some have a family and maybe aren't any of those things. And he not only has the authority to ruin your work life, he can ruin your personal life by denying days off, making you stay late, writing you up if he doesn't like you and not letting you promote, etc. Safe to say, everyone was pissed and I had nothing to lose. I was separating soon and figured I'd have some fun before I got out. I created a burner Facebook account and posted the letter and the officer's picture on a popular military enlisted group page. Within 2 days, it spread like wildfire. But I wasn't done yet. The military has something called challenge coins. Think of trading cards but custom coins that come in many shapes and sizes. I designed one with his face and a big middle finger in the back. On top of that I designed stickers too. Show how proud us deviants are. Other coin designs came from other people as well, but so far I think mine was more popular. I sold over 70 coins to the person who originally sent me the picture at a huge discounted price so she can sell them for a profit for herself. So the officer's face is everywhere because most people keep their coins displayed on their desks. No matter where the officer went to work, he would see his face on someone's desk. And since it didn't have his name on the coin, I can't officially say it's him. I sold more stateside and even some got sent to Europe. I made about $3,000 overall, which was nice. The story even got featured on the online naval newspaper and on 2 popular YouTube channels. And if you're military, you know the only time big military care is when it's too big to sweep under the rug. This story got the officer sent up to captain's mast, which is like a Navy court. He tried to say his wife was the one that wrote the letter, but no one is buying it because her writing style is way worse. She even tried to take the fall, but no one believed her. They both ended up deleting all social media. Due to this, he got served 3 UCMJ articles, which basically are his offenses. But there's more. When you're in the military, you have a deadline on how long you can be a certain rank. If you don't pick up, then you're kicked out. And because he's new and got served UCMJ articles, he won't be up for promotion and therefore was involuntarily separated. Also, the officer program he went through pays for his PhD. When the military pays for your PhD, you have to serve 10 years to pay them back. If you don't complete 10 years, you have to pay the military back with money instead of time. So he lost his job and now has to pay back the military for his PhD, and since it takes a while for the paperwork to have him and his family sent back stateside, you can bet he socially suffered because no one worked with him. My boss tried to sleep with my fiancée, so I exposed all his cheating to his wife. This was several years ago. So my boss, an extreme type A personality, found out I was seeing a young lady at another one of our offices. It was a long-distance relationship. He was the type he liked to control everything and mess with people for fun. He was also married to another employee, but he was very unfaithful. And he had a hobby, photography. He liked to take pics of himself and his conquest, in the act. Then he would show the pics around the production floor and brag about it. Well, on his next trip to this other office he tried to get my girlfriend to sleep with him, but she spurned him. He made up some lies and got her fired. It took a long time, but I was patient. I knew he kept the photos in his office. He could not risk keeping them at home where his wife might stumble upon them. One Saturday I was working out and the cleaning lady came through. They unlocked his office. I came in acting like I was taking dimensions on some drawings. The lady just asked me to close the door when I was finished. She left and went down toward accounting. That's when I went through his desk. Sure enough, in the back of one drawer I found a stack of photos 4 tall. I took them all. Then I waited until he went on another trip. When he did, I went out for lunch. I had a dozen pics of him, in the act with 4 different women, all showing his face. The women all had dark or red hair. His wife is a blonde. I drove to the town he lived in, to the closest post office to his house, and mailed the pics to his wife with no return address. She divorced him, and her lawyer took him to the cleaners. My girlfriend is now my wife, and my old boss's life is ruined, having lost both his wife, and eventually his job as well. Neighbor harassed my dog for months, and then tried suing me. About 6 or 7 months ago, my neighbor got a drone. I don't mind people having hobbies, but for some reason he insisted on flying like the biggest jerk possible. He would hover in front of other houses and windows, try to race cars going down the road, and worst of all, he had a habit of flying his drone in my fenced backyard, buzzing over my dog, diving low just over my dog's head before circling around to do it again. My dog isn't small, he's about 70 pounds and a Malamute, but the drone terrified him, and I was worried what would happen if it hit him. I asked my neighbor several times to please not fly in my yard and explained that it was scaring my dog. He basically told me to get lost and laughed in my face. When it still continued, I called the police. Unfortunately, there wasn't much they could do other than ask him to please not fly over my house/property. Finally, in late December it happened. My dog got tired of his poop and managed to catch the drone right as it was diving towards him. He shredded the drone. The thing was just a jumbled mess of wires and plastic. Neighbor was pissed. He stormed over to my house swearing and threatening me, which I ignored. A week later, I got a summons to small claims court. He wanted $900 for the cost of his drone and an additional $300 for supposedly denying him access to his property. F that. He could have unalived my dog. I don't have kids or a girlfriend. I just have my dog, who is my best friend for the past 7 years. That dog has moved with me 3 times, was there when I graduated college, saw me buy my first house and my first new car. I love my dog. Turns out, Him suing me was the best thing to ever happen. When we got to small claims court, the judge basically laughed away his claims that I had intentionally trained my dog to attack his drone. But little did he know I was prepared. I had dozens of photos of my yard showing it was impossible for him to accidentally fly that low to my dog, videos of him harassing my dog in the past, and I had saved all my medical bills from taking my dog to the vet. $700 for an x-ray? Check. Another $250 to sedate him during? Why not? Don't want him being uncomfortable. Full dental exam with tooth cleaning/repair? $400. Then there was the cost of anti-anxiety meds and a secondary checkup, wet food for a week in case his teeth were hurt, and extra just for good measure. In the end, the asshole ended up owing me almost $2,000, and now is being investigated by the FAA for not having a registered drone and violating several FAA regulations concerning drone flight, too near an airport, too close to other people, out of sight of operator and way above the maximum altitude. Enjoy never being allowed to fly drones again, PP. I got moved to salary to majorly gimp my pay, so I left my boss high and dry. I used to work as a chef, for an owner who liked to micromanage things and was a bit narcissistic. I'd been working there for about 3 years, getting good reviews, customers loved me, and updated the menu. Made everything from scratch. People used to think the place was open box/heat, serving food. Quality had gone up and morale was great in my kitchen. Annual sales went from $850,000 to $1.4 million, about maximum capacity for the space. The increase in sales and income went to the owner's head. He was always spending money on frivolous things and squandering cash. Sound system, stage for the event space, ECT. One example, I needed a new Alto Sham. A used one would have sufficed. Nope, he bought the top of the line one that could be used as a smoker to $12,000 versus what I wanted could be gotten used for $1,500. Granted, I enjoyed that piece of equipment, which after I left they no longer use the smoker function. Years later I still occasionally get emails invoices from a vendor and see they bring in pre-cooked smoked meats now. I was hourly, but then the owner realized during the busy season I and my sous chef put in 70 to 80 hours weeks. Doing this he realized I made more take-home pay from his business than he did. At peak times he'd maybe work 40 to 50 hours a week. So to save money he puts me and my sous on salary, effectively cutting my pay by about $10,000 a year. My sous netted a loss of $2K/year, if we were to work at our current level of effort. During all of this the owner is saying he is not expecting us to work over 40 hours a week, ever. He even has this written into our contracts. So with the extra time off at home with family it is okay, I still like the job and my staff. During the slower time this was great. Also during this time I had won a local award for my cooking, and the narcissistic owner was not too pleased. He was no longer recognized as the creative force in the kitchen that bears his name. So his meddling and micromanaging increased. It had gone from it's your kitchen, my name, do what you want to it's my name and my kitchen do it this way. Morale and quality began to suffer. Just prior to the holiday season my sous wants to go back to his home country for 2.5 months, November, December and January peak crazy time for us. I have good help and am good with it, owner approved the time off. Owner thinks I am gonna save him some money that holiday season by working my usual 70 to 80 hours a week. Nope, cue the malicious compliance. I start writing the holiday schedule, sous is on vacation, I have my 40 during key prep times and peak business times. The rest of my staff gets serious overtime. Basically the sous and I carried a lot of the weight in the kitchen and could outperform most of our small staff. So with sous on vacay and I only pulling 40 full-time staff is now working 60-ish hours a week, and part-timers are getting 40. Things are running pretty smoothly until the owner realizes I'm not there like I always am during the holiday rush. He's in the kitchen more trying to micromanage my staff, giving them poor advice, contradicting my directions and timing for events, screwing up the small parties my staff could handle while I am off. After a few weeks of this he realizes he's going to be paying the staff out more in overtime than he saved on moving me and my sous to salary. He starts demanding I work more hours to stop hemorrhaging out to the kitchen staff. I show him my contract where I am not expected to work over 40 hours a week. Now he says it's just a guideline. I hold him to the 40 a week, it's Christmas and now I can for once spend time with my family. Now with my sous returning, I'm burned out from the constant micromanaging and gaslighting by the owner. I hand the reins to my sous and change careers after 25 years in the industry and never look back.
Hey there, Nancy. Got a minute to spare? I've got some thrilling news that I can't wait to share with you.
Good afternoon. Sure, I can talk for a while. What's going on?
Well, first things first. How's Mark been? My son's been treating you well, I trust. He's a little silly sometimes, but he's got a heart of gold, you know. And of course, I hope you're doing well yourself. You're a very smart, strong young lady, and I would hate to see anything happen to you.
No worries on that front. Mark and I are just as we've always been. Nothing too dramatic to report. We're just living our lives to the fullest.
That's music to my ears. In these times, it seems like everyone has a heart-wrenching tale to share when you catch up with them. But enough of that, let's get to the exciting part. Ready for a surprise?
What is it? Should I be guessing or is this just a figure of speech?
Ashley's tying the knot. You and Mark are about to gain a new brother-in-law. But wait, there's more. She's expecting a baby. I'm going to be a grandma and you're about to become an aunt. Isn't it just incredible? Sometimes I have to pinch myself just to make sure it's not all a dream.
Wow, that is quite the news. I hope the wedding isn't too rushed for her sake. An unexpected baby is quite the life changer. Hopefully they can get married soon enough so they don't have to worry about any societal stigma.
Yes, it's somewhat of a whirlwind wedding, as we used to say in my day. But what truly matters is this joyous new chapter unfolding for our family.
Whirlwind wedding? Is that something I should be worried about? It sounds rather ominous.
Oh no, it's just an old saying. It slipped my mind that you grew up overseas. Let me explain. Back in the day, if a man got a young woman pregnant, her father would show up with a shotgun and ensure they got married right away.
Oh wow. Well, as long as you're excited about this, and so is the groom-to-be. Anyway, that really is fantastic news, and I'm genuinely happy for you and Ashley.
Can you believe it? The girls are already 4 months along. They took their time deciding what steps to take next. We need to find her a dress that'll accommodate her growing belly soon, because it certainly isn't getting any smaller.
Oh dear. Well, I'm sure there are dressmakers who specialize in such situations. You must be over the moon about the upcoming wedding.
Absolutely. There's nothing quite like seeing your daughter walk down the aisle as a bride. And I hope someday that you'll get to experience this joy too, dear Nancy. Speaking of weddings, we expect you and Mark at the ceremony.
Of course. Wouldn't miss it.
It's such an overwhelming feeling of joy that brings tears to my eyes. It reminds me of when I first held Mark in my arms.
I can only imagine how that feels.
Could you do me a favor and pass on this news to Mark? Once we sort out all the details, I will forward them to you. You know how he struggles with texting, and I don't want to disturb him at work or during his time with you. He'll be thrilled to hear he's going to be an uncle.
The next day.
Good morning, Nancy. How are you today? I'm still over the moon about the news. But let me get to the point. What did you tell Mark about the wedding? He called me last night, and I was expecting him to be ecstatic just like us. He was furious. I've never heard him talk to me like that. He wasn't just angry. He was confused and outraged even. He asked if we were joking with him. What's going on?
Good morning, Sandra. That's very odd. I didn't notice anything wrong with him. Actually, now that I think about it, I heard some yelling last night when I was in the bath, but I thought it was just the TV. Or maybe Mark getting excited over a game as he usually does. But that must have been when he called you. He didn't say anything to me about it. This is news to me.
That doesn't make sense. I'm his mother, and I know when something's bothering him. All I did was share the news about the wedding with you. So something must have gone wrong somewhere. Are you sure you didn't say anything weird to him? Even by mistake?
Well, I told him about the wedding and how happy you were to become a grandma and that we were invited to join with them. That's all.
Then why would he snap at me like that?
Just a guess. But maybe this is still a touchy subject for Mark.
Touchy subject? What do you mean? All I did was tell him that Ashley's pregnant. You should be happy for her. What's so upsetting about that?
Sandra, I was hoping we could avoid this conversation, but it seems inevitable now. You haven't forgotten about the accident 2 years ago, have you? The one where we lost our baby.
How could I ever forget such a horrible thing? But it's in the past now, and you both need to move on from it, especially if that's what caused Mark's reaction.
You make it sound so easy when it was a very traumatic experience for both of us.
Dramatic? Isn't that a bit strong?
Not when I have to relive that nightmare almost every day. Remember, I was as far along in my pregnancy as Ashley is now when you hit me with your car. It's not easy for us to just forget something like that even though we've tried therapy and support groups. While I've always been better at hiding my feelings than Mark, I don't blame him for having a hard time with his news. And for the last time, it was an accident. The car's brakes failed. It wasn't my fault.
And for the last time it was an accident. The car's brakes failed. It wasn't my fault.
Look, whether or not it was your fault isn't the point here. It's not like you meant to hurt me or our baby.
Then what do you want from me? It wasn't easy for me either. The guilt nearly killed me.
Sandra, I don't care what you do with your life. You can drive a cab or race a car for all I care. You have no idea what it feels like to lose a baby inside you. It wasn't like I had an abortion or something. The baby was alive and kicking.
Oh please. We all suffered a loss that day. Don't you think I loved that car? It was part of our family for so long and then I had to scrap it because it was totaled.
How can you compare your car to my miscarriage? Your car was just a thing. My baby was a life.
Yeah, you said that before. After I paid for everything, the damages, the hospital bills, therapy sessions. I've taken all the blame for that awful accident. Can't you just let it go?
Money can't fix everything, Sandra. You left me broken, Sandra, in more ways than one. And now, even if Mark and I wanted to move on, we can't. You know I can never have another baby.
Okay. I get what you might be upset about Ashley's wedding, but I really thought it would make you happy. Can't you be happy for her? Can't you look on the bright side? And Mark, he never had a baby inside him and he didn't lose his ability to have kids. If he's so unhappy, why doesn't he just find someone else who can give him a child? He's a man after all.
That's the most insensitive thing you've ever said to me. And that's saying something. This is why he yelled at you on the phone.
Alright, enough of this depressing talk. Great, enough of this depressing talk. I'll send you the wedding details soon. And you better be there, both of you. You need some fun and joy in your life after all this misery. Trust me.
2 weeks later.
Grab a pen and paper, Nancy. I have some exciting news for you. Ashley and George have finally set a date for their wedding.
Hello, Sandra. I hope you're doing well. Did you find a nice venue for the ceremony?
Yes. Thanks to you, my dear. Remember the hotel downtown where you had your reception? The one with all the Art Deco paintings and sculptures from the 1920s? Well, they had an opening. And it's very affordable, and I know a lot of people there from when we planned your wedding. So it's perfect.
Oh, I see. That will bring back some memories for Mark and me.
Isn't it wonderful? Anyway, this is going to be a small wedding, so we're sending out fewer invitations. Which is fine by me. Wedding invitations can be so expensive. And it's still so much fun to plan a wedding, even a small one. It's one of the best parts of being a mother, don't you think?
I suppose it is. So, when is the wedding?
It's going to be the first Sunday of next month. Mark your calendar and don't forget. What's wrong? You don't have any work that day, do you?
You know we talked about this a few weeks ago, but it seems like you're being very insensitive right now.
What? What are you talking about? Oh, come on. Not this again. How does this have anything to do with that accident that I've apologized for a million times? You're being ridiculous, dear. Just tell me what it is.
You think I'm being ridiculous? Really? You're the one who keeps making it harder for us to move on. That day you picked because it was cheap and convenient. That's the day my world fell apart 2 years ago when you hit me with your car.
Oh, is that all? It's just a date, dear. Don't you think it's time to make some new memories on this day?
It's not that simple, Sandra. You can't just erase what happened. The fact that you can't even remember. It's unbelievable.
Well, please. You're impossible to please, aren't you? Maybe if you could talk about something else besides your miscarriage, you might be able to move on. Didn't they teach you that in therapy or support groups? Or did you skip that session because you were too sad after looking at your calendar? You have your whole future ahead of you, Nancy. You're only rooting yourself by living in the past like this. I better be careful where I see you at the wedding, or else your gloomy mood might ruin everyone's happiness.
Living in the past? If our baby had survived, they would still be a toddler today. How can you expect me to forget that?
I'm starting to wonder if that accident damaged your brain too. I had a great aunt who had a lobotomy, and she was just as stuck in the past as you are now. Move on for your own sake.
Every word you say hurts me more than the last.
Oh great! Now I'm responsible for your misery too. That's really unfair of you.
You're the one who's at fault here. Moving on means finding peace, and that's why I've tried not to fight with you. Even when you ignore my pain or insult me, I still try to be civil with you. The last thing Mark or I need is more conflict over something that was an accident. So there you have it. I'm full of grief and anger, but I choose to treat you kindly even if I don't feel any warmth towards you.